Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fully Charged Show podcast, where today we're asking the question, is it possible to entirely remove the upfront cost of home energy technologies? And if so, what's the catch? Well, very shortly, I'm going to attempt to answer this question with Simon Roberts, who is the CEO of Heatio. But before I do, I need just 30 seconds of your time to tell you two things. Firstly, my name is Imogen. I'm one of the presenters here on the Fully Charged Show and Everything Electric Show. And whilst, of course, I am extremely biased, I highly recommend that you go and check out both of those YouTube channels once you've had this little audio foray into the world of home energy and clean energy technologies. And secondly, I have to tell you about our live shows. Next up, we're in Harrogate at the end of May, and you must come and join us for this wonderful festival of electrification. There will be thousands of electric vehicle test drives, there'll be loads of home energy technologies on display, loads of experts for you to ask your various questions to, regardless of where you are on your own clean energy transitions. There'll be loads of speakers and wonderful activities for kids as well. And of course, we'll be there, and it is always so wonderful to meet you, our lovely listeners and viewers, to find out what you care about and to continue these very important conversations. But enough of that. All of the details are in the description box below. Let's meet Simon. Simon, thank you so much for joining us today. When we spoke on the phone before this conversation, you told me that electrification of heating would be your mastermind subject. So I have very high hopes for this conversation, not least to explore the world of energy as a service, removing those upfront capital costs, and all of those wonderful bits and bobs. But before we get into that, I want to know, what is Heatio? What exactly do you do?
Yeah, it's a good question. We've probably been on a bit of a journey with it, and more recently we've been really trying to nail down that value proposition. But essentially, we have two core solutions. Our first is Get Smart, which essentially helps homeowners through the journey of having technology installed in the home, but we take a very data-driven approach to that. So we look at historical energy usage patterns. We understand what the drivers are for the customer and how they can what are they looking to save in terms of energy, and what their budgets are, and what journey they want to go on. And we essentially use data to be able to enable them to understand how much energy they can save, how much money they can save. But we also connect them with a network of approved installers and funding providers to really address some of those challenges in terms of the logistics of having the technology installed from a reliable source, but also the big upfront challenge of capital cost. So that's kind of solution one for the people who haven't got the technology installed. And then our Get Connected product is more around people who have gone through that journey, have the technology installed, but maybe it's operating in silos. So the battery storage system operating independently from their heat pump, for instance, or their EV charger. Especially in the UK, where we do tend to kind of like to pick the product we want and not necessarily commit to a single manufacturer. So our platform connects those technologies. It uses a combination of AI and smart algorithms to understand how that homeowner is using their home, and then optimize the technology on their behalf. And as part of that solution, we integrate with smart tariffs. So if there's taking advantage of times of day where energy prices are cheaper, making sure we coast through the higher price periods, and also looking at the best times of day to export energy onto the grid to maximise the earning potential.
Oh my goodness. So on the one hand, understanding a homeowner's energy use and the different bits and bobs that they would require. And then secondly, how that's managed in a really intelligent way. I always think it's interesting when we have these sorts of conversations of what would, your 2007 self actually think. And back then I remember watching the documentaries where, everyone goes to work at 8:30 in the morning, and that's when, you're using less energy at home, and then you come home, everyone puts the kettle on at the same time, and you get the big spikes. And I'm, fairly certain that our energy profiles follow that probably pretty roughly. But there are so many other things that have been added to the mix, not least more intermittent sources of energy, the fact that people work flexibly, or they work from home, or they have smart devices which can be turned on and off to cater for different types of energy. And then, of course, how electric vehicles are charged as well. So there are so many more data points, and obviously the proliferation of AI as well, to make this way more intelligent. However, I imagine I'd be interested to know how intimidated some of your customers are by that, because certainly, and maybe this is far too much of an assumption, but let's take a octogenarian who is not familiar with AI, maybe doesn't have a smartphone. How, when you say, oh, okay, we can control this all in AI, how do you think that's responded to? Or actually, do you see sort of a core set of customers that are already au fait with these sorts of things?
No, I mean there is a variety of customers in the mix, but absolutely you have to consider, the people who have invested in this technology. This is something very emotive. This is in your home. This is keeping your family warm. This is keeping the hot water up to temperature, ready for bath time for the kids. This is this is the school run in the morning, making sure that your car has got is fully charged. And so these are very emotive decisions, and that isn't something that we take lightly. And I think one of the core parts of the product is giving that confidence. And actually, you don't need to be in a position where this automatically takes over your home. You can you can essentially subscribe to the system, connect your technology in your home to the system, and then we can deliver you a schedule for the next day. And that schedule will say, based on everything we know, this is how we would recommend you run your home for the next day. And you can take that or leave that. You can apply it or not apply it, and you can feed back to us as well. So if there is something fundamentally wrong with what we're suggesting, we want that feedback loop so we can start, so the algorithm can learn and improve. And there may be some people that say, you know what, connect it and I'll give it a go. And there may be some people that say, look, I'll review your advice. I'll take it forward should I see fit. But we find there's a customer base out there who have had this technology installed, and when you consider all the factors that certainly our algorithm has to consider, from half hourly energy pricing, from when you should export a battery, when you should charge a battery, the travel arrangements around how and when you're using the electric vehicle, and when's best to charge that, and in the future when's best to discharge that, and and the big one, heating. If we can predict the temperature for the next day, and we understand what your heating profile is, knowing when to turn that heating on to take advantage of off-peak periods of electricity. Specifically for us, we focus towards heat pumps, so utilizing off-peak electricity periods and coasting through those high cost periods. It's such a huge amount of data that at the moment a homeowner with all this technology would, for the most part, have to make those decisions themselves. And some of them do, and we've got some amazing advisors that we work with, that talk us through their evenings of receiving all this data and looking at all these things. I'm really enjoying that process. But unfortunately, there's a high proportion of people who don't have the time nor the inclination to do that, and they end up with really smart technology, unfortunately operating in a very dumb way. And that's what we've got to get people comfortable with it. We've got to get them to trust it, and then apply it to their system.
And I suppose actually to see savings in their bank account at the end of the month as well. So, in terms of those data inputs, you've obviously got understanding how homeowners live within their home and consume energy within their home. But presumably, you're also taking into consideration projections of electricity cost, weather, and that kind of thing. What are some of those sort of core ingredients of data inputs?
Yeah, so I always think it's quite interesting when we have all this intelligence, but fundamentally, two of the biggest drivers are weather, and no amount of AI and predicted algorithms and smart technology are going to control that. So we have we have the starting point, which is the solar generation, and that curve will happen if the sun comes up. We have no control over that, and the weather conditions when we start looking at the temperatures outside specifically. That links directly to the heating demands of the property. So they tend to be our starting point. And then internally within the home, we start looking at the scheduling that the client currently uses. Heating schedules are a big one. what they're currently doing with it and whether that could be improved, um, but also an understanding of how and when they want heat in the home. And with people now, a lot of people now working from home or hybrid working, that's a lot more challenging than it used to be, where you would kind of have a few hours in the morning and a few hours in the afternoon and maybe a setback period in the day. We're now seeing, some people, the home is more active on a Tuesday and a Thursday, and then the week after that changes. So the system has to learn how the home is being used. And then a big one that changes frequently is the agile energy tariff. So if somebody's on something like Octopus Agile, a tracker tariff where the energy prices are changing every half hour for the day ahead, periods of the day where they're even being paid to take energy off the grid and credited energy periods. So taking all those things into account, and trying to make the best decision we can on how to run that home. So yeah, there's a huge amount of data feeds that go in, and the algorithm and the machine just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and we've got to manage that as well from our perspective. Obviously, AI and machine learning, it starts to really put a strain on energy resources in its own right. So we've got to make it, we're building our tech in such a way that we're not contributing to a bigger problem further down the line. So yeah, it's a very big tech challenge, but fundamentally, it's the starting point for it is learning how that customer wants to run their home, and then everything else is just data extract from there.
So, in that first instance where you've understood the energy profile of a particular household, of how much energy they consume, how big that house is, all of that sort of stuff, how actively are you involved in saying, okay, well, you could consider heat pumps, but there are other solutions like infrared heating? Do you give any recommendations on that? Where do you fit in that bit of the puzzle?
Yeah, that's kind of front and center for us. We recognize the fact that there's a huge number of households in the UK, and their starting position is quite simple. I don't know what to do. Um, I don't know what the right decision is to make. And traditionally, if you go down that journey and if you think maybe a heat pump is the right decision, you're going to go to a heat pump installer. And guess what? You're going to get promoted a heat pump. Or if you go to a solar installer, you're going to get promoted solar. And each of those things will be done in many cases in isolation and not necessarily considering future plans. So our Get Smart product, is very much a hand holding and supportive journey to enable the customer to go through the process. And we know through our time in the industry that is quite a convoluted process. It can be quite a bureaucratic process as well. So our starting point there is we ask the client to connect their home to our Flex platform, and that enables us to retrieve their historical smart meter data. We then go through a process of conversation with the homeowner about what their ambitions are, what their budgets are, what kind of journey they want to go on. We have some people that come to us and say, "Look, I want to do the whole house in one hit. I want to move out for 2 weeks. I want you to come in to kit the whole place out, and when I come back, everything's sorted." And we have some people that want to do it in smaller increments, and maybe that's the maximum they can afford within their budget. So we create a tailored plan, but fundamentally, we use our data and our housing models to be able to clearly demonstrate the combined impact of the decisions that they make. Um, be that adding solar to the property with a battery, and demonstrating what that looks like in terms of a generation and self consumption. So they can clearly see what their energy savings will be. But then the ability to, for instance, apply a heat pump to that solution and take away the gas boiler, and they see their self consumption increase. Obviously, the generation is fixed, but the self consumption increases, their savings improve. Is that a compelling enough argument for that customer then to decide they want to go down that technology route? Um, and we also see people coming at it from a slightly different angle where maybe they're in a distressed situation, their boiler has broken, they want to make the right decision, but they need to know the impact of that decision. So maybe we're modeling the impact of a heat pump solution and then conveying to them what the impact of solar and battery will be further down the line and in the future. So it's very much trying to put that front and center in front of the customer and helping them understand the impact of the decision. And then secondly, looking at the solutions that can enable that. So whether that's installers, approved installers in those regions, which manufacturers may be best suited to that client, and fundamentally how or what funding options are available to them, and be that government grant funding or the product that we're developing at the moment, which is energy as a service, which essentially takes that capital cost away and enables them to spread that cost over a prolonged period of time.
A seamless segue to energy as a service, but before we get there, I suppose the conclusion of that is that actually, we often get the question at the Fully Charged show of, oh, well, what would you recommend? Is it, things like infrared heating and heat batteries, or is it stuff like heat pumps? And the answer is always, it depends. And it depends who you're working with to guide you through that journey. It depends on your own house. It depends how you use energy. And I can imagine that a big part of your job is like heat therapy. How do I guide you through this journey and be really empathetic to your concerns and the way that you live your life as well?
Yeah,
Um,
it's a huge part of the process, and I think a starting point usually is we get clients coming to us who have maybe already started a little bit of that research process, and sometimes we do have to kind of take them back a few steps
mm,
and start the journey again. A good example more recently was a client that had electric storage heaters in the home, and had received a quotation from a heat pump installer to remove the storage heaters and put a heat pump in. But hadn't really didn't have a comprehension of the level of I'm going to say inconvenience, but the level of work that would need to go in terms of when you take an electric system out and you run a wet system in, running pipe work around the house, and how that's all going to be taken into consideration. And in that scenario, when we discussed infrared heating, it wasn't an option they'd ever come across. And
mm,
actually, technically, they already had power supplies next to every radiator in the property. And when we modelled it through, the impact of infrared heating and the capital cost of infrared heating was actually far more effective than going down the heat pump route. It's ensuring as well that we present them both as options,
mm,
and not necessarily say, for us, this we think this is the right one for you. Taking the time to talk them through a heat pump solution, taking them time to talk them through an infrared solution. But we also have clients that come through and maybe their understanding of the impact and the savings of this technology is greater than it actually is. And we've had clients come to us that have got a perfectly good gas boiler. They're looking at ways they can save money on their energy bills, and that's their driver. And when we talk them through it, the reality might be that a heat pump or electrified heating in itself might not be the right solution for them right now.
mm,
And it might be that it's a solar solution right now if they've recently invested in that boiler. So it's not always about putting the tech on. It's about really understanding what the client's needs are and what the drivers are, and then giving them that honest advice, but using data to drive those decisions rather than it
mm.
just being opinion based.
It's so fascinating. I feel like I had a bit of I was going to say existential crisis. It wasn't that at all. It was a bit of a kind of moment. I knocked down a wall the other day, not just for fun, like not just a random wall. This was a wall I intended to knock down in my home. And I'm not a builder. I don't think I've ever really stopped to think about how houses are constructed and how, what the electric system looks like, what your heating and plumbing system looks like. And it was quite an amazing situation to sort of knock down this wall to see the inner workings of how or at least a little bit of the inner workings of how our home works. And we were asking ourselves, actually, do we move the radiator in this particular room, or do we get infrared heating? And then it sort of opened up this Pandora's box of, well, should we get solar first and then consider these options? And, I'm someone who I think I'm reasonably informed in this industry because we talk about this stuff all the time. And it was certainly overwhelming, I think. Um, So yes, it's been added to our to-do list that we need to go on this journey. But at the same time, it is difficult because our house is brand new. It's all of the technology in it is not clean energy technologies, but it is new, and you've got that kind of question to ask yourself as well. Okay, we alluded to it a little bit, but energy as a service. I want to get into this, and I want to talk about some things, some exciting things like virtual power plants, energy as a service, how this unlocks a broader distribution of these clean home energy technologies. But before we do, I think it'd be quite helpful to set the scene of, where are we in this transition, and actually how many households do have things like heat pumps, solar, because it feels like we have huge ambitions as a country here in the UK to install lots and lots of heat pumps and other similar technologies, but we're early on in this journey. What's your take on that?
We are. We're absolutely. It's and for any business that's starting to move into this sector, the size of the market, the opportunity, and where it's going to go is going to be huge. But yeah, right now where we stand, I think there's around 1.4, 1.5 million homes with solar, around 300, 350,000 with heat pumps, somewhere in the region around 100, 120,000 with battery storage systems, which when you consider 28 million homes in the UK, that's a huge market to go after. But we're very much in the early stages. So there's I think there's a lot of learning, there's a lot of catching up to do with the rest of Europe and even the rest of the world.
Mm. And in terms of because you've been in this industry for a little while, why do you think that rollout has been quite so slow?
Yeah, well, it probably goes back to my mastermind subject. So yeah, I mean, I've been in heat pump technology for 20 years, and kind of by being in that, you inevitably get exposed to these other industries, and solar and battery, and everything in my journey has been from starting out an installer, moving on to design and specification, and so kind of seeing that industry from some of the first heat pumps going into residential homes in the UK to where we are now, and and the amount of times I've looked back and said, maybe my life would have been different if I'd have just focused on gas boilers. That would have probably been, I'd have probably been running a firm of installers going around the country fitting them now. But it's, I think it's a combination of things. I think we've had various political drivers that haven't necessarily come to fruition. Um, I think our reliance on cheap gas has been a big factor. And I apply that across to solar and battery as well, because I think the minute you step into the world of electrification, and that could be something as simple as registering on the Flex platform and seeing your energy usage, and being able to visualize how much energy you're using, whether it's gas or electric, in comparison to maybe just a monthly energy bill. The
Mhm.
minute you get into that and call it the kind of gateway drug, when you see that and you start on this journey, if the first thing you're presented with is, if I did something like installing a heat pump when my boiler broke, and we consider there's 1.7 million boilers fitted every year. So in theory, every single one of those boilers could be a consideration for having a heat pump fitted. And you see the comparable cost for having a heat pump fitted over a gas boiler, and you see the comparable savings of a heat pump over a gas boiler. It's not a very compelling argument. It's not. It's a very difficult sell, I would imagine, if you're out there pushing the technology. Um, so inevitably that leads to less customer uptake. And I think if more people were putting heat pumps into the home, maybe they would see that naturally their electrical consumption increase, and naturally that would lead to considerations around what I can do to generate my own electricity, and solar and battery storage, and then leading into optimization of smart tariffs. So, well, I think all of those things would culminate, but as it stands at the moment, we're still in this position where kind of gas prices follow electricity prices, and the
Mm.
multiples make it very difficult. So, thankfully, we've got a lot of innovators in the UK that are really keen on the technology, and looking to drive change. But I think fundamentally we need to see that difference in gas and electricity fall in favour of electricity without necessarily plummeting the UK into fuel poverty. So I don't think it's necessarily about increasing gas prices and reducing electricity, but maybe incentivizing electricity prices for a period of time. So people start to look at that as an opportunity, and then over time weaning us off those cheaper gas prices and getting us to a place where we are more electrified.
We did a podcast a few weeks ago about marginal pricing and why is the cost of wind so often dictated by the cost of gas. And it was I'm going to say it was quite a humbling experience because, I mean, I learned so much. It was honestly like energy economics for dummies. Um, but it does feel like actually the only way that we can do that and we can decouple the cost of electricity from gas is by having more and more renewables on the system such that they are much more frequently dictating the price of electricity. But I do wonder if things like actually a larger uptake of solar for people's homes, um, community solar and wind, and obviously a greater distribution of renewables on the grid more generally would help drive that adoption and then allow people to see, okay, yes, my electricity bill is going to go up, my gas bill goes to zero, and now I can see a much bigger saving. Um, have you been following any of the stuff on zonal pricing of electricity?
To be honest, no.
I will ignore that subject then because I haven't read enough either. But note to self, we will return to this in a future episode. Slash anyone in the comments, let us know what you think about zonal pricing. Um, so where are we going next? Okay, so I think a huge part of this puzzle is really making the compelling case for people that actually their bills, they're going to see a benefit, and that with renewables, with self-generation, etc., people are only going to see that in a more marked way. But there is this question of high upfront capital cost. How how does energy as a service start to tackle that particular challenge?
Yeah, it's I mean on the front of it, and probably the easiest way to convey the proposition is that it removes all the upfront capital cost. So instead of paying for having the technology designed and installed and maintained, instead you pay a low monthly fee, and within that fee it includes service, it includes the supply, the design, the installation, but also the service, maintenance, replacement, and optimization of the technology. And the technology we're talking about here is a bundle of solar, battery, and a heat pump, and any associated upgrades that are required in the home to maximize the efficiency of that technology.
So someone comes to you and says, I want all of this stuff, solar, battery, heat pump, and all of the work to make that possible. They don't pay anything from an upfront cost and are on some service and maintenance payment plan.
Exactly. Exactly.
Typically, how long would that payment plan last?
As it stands at the moment, it's still a very new proposition. The current term is around 20 years. So it is a very long term commitment from the client. It's designed so that essentially you, as a service provider, we become your primary energy supplier. So you can imagine having that technology installed in the home. You're going to see a significant reduction in the amount of energy that you would typically buy from your energy provider. So in a way, you're making a very long-term commitment to a your new energy partner. I think is probably the better term than a supplier. But 20 years is the term at the moment. That will come down um, as capital costs reduce. But part of the challenge is really bringing the lenders and the financiers on this journey with us and bringing them into the world of renewables and getting them comfortable with it. So I think in time we will see shorter term agreements and we will see break clauses. Um, a crucial part of the agreement that we've put in place for the pilot that we're working on with Eon Energy and Solar Zero at the moment is the ability for it to transfer from one homeowner to another. Um, when you're considering a 20-year term, typically in the UK, we consider house buying and ownership over a 5 to 7 year term. So that people usually look at that and say, in 7 years' time, I may want to move house, or 5 years' time, I may want to move house. So we've built that into the agreement so that they can transfer from one homeowner to another. But we recognise that the length of the term is going to be a challenging one for the UK, where we don't tend to take out long-term mortgages like the rest of Europe, rest of the world even. We kind of take out a mortgage and look at a fixed rate term for maybe 2 years or 5 years and then switch providers, whereas a lot of Europe, they look at these longer term mortgages and a mortgage for life even. So, and that, there's a big mindset change there in terms of that long term commitment, and we've got to build confidence in the customer base and demonstrate that. And that's certainly one of the objectives of the pilot that we're working on with E.ON at the moment, is to really demonstrate that this can not only save them money but also save them a lot of time, hassle, and essentially you're putting all of that maintenance and support in the hands of an organisation who are contractually bound to deliver that.
I have so many questions, and I feel I'm slightly worried we're going to open up Pandora's box. But before we get into any of those, just tell us a little bit about the partnership that you currently have with E.ON, who's involved in that, and what do each of those different stakeholders bring to that pilot as well?
Yes, it's been a really exciting one. So the project itself is being funded through the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero. Um, the actual the funds themselves come from the Net Zero Innovation Portfolio, which is a £10 billion pot that the government has set aside to incentivise these kinds of initiatives. And specifically, it's being run under the Green Homes Finance Accelerator. And the partnership really is between E.ON Energy Solutions as the energy supply for the project. So they'll be selecting customers of theirs from across the northwest to take part in this pilot. Heatio, through our Get Smart and Get Connected products, we will enable that journey. So we will design this and specify the system with the client and take them through the potential energy savings and the service contract. And then we are working with a company called Solar Zero, who are predominantly based out in New Zealand. They've actually been delivering a very similar model to this in New Zealand for over 10 years now. They've got around 10,000, maybe more, energy as a service contracts in place in New Zealand. So they're the lender partner. So they're working with us to essentially bring all that learning over from New Zealand, which has a very similar climate and operating conditions to the UK. And they're backed by BlackRock. BlackRock are one of the world's largest asset finance provider with over $10 trillion in assets across the world. So certainly a great partnership to have alongside us. And then I think a crucial part as part of the consortium is we also have Energy Systems Catapult, who are really representing the homeowners and the consumers and helping us as a collective refine the proposition to make sure that we meet those customer needs specifically for clients in the UK and tailor that proposition to deliver maximum benefit.
Okay, where do I begin? I'm going to slightly play devil's advocate, so I apologize for that in advance. However, I know that you've been fundraising recently, so I'm going to be a less critical audience than perhaps the investors you've been speaking to recently. But I think one of the things that I find interesting is that these long-term service agreements are really attractive because you're sort of outsourcing the risk. You've got that assurance of maintenance. You're not having to pay that upfront capital cost. You're also outsourcing a lot of the headache in terms of what do you need, how is it spec'd, et cetera, all the things that we've been speaking about in this podcast so far. But could it be more compelling for a customer to actually just get a loan for all of this stuff? Has there been any sort of balance of what's the sort of tip over point?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when we talk about our kind of Get Smart product, this is designed as an option. It won't be for everybody, absolutely not. And if you can walk into a high street bank and get a loan for to have the system installed at a better rate, and you're more comfortable with that, and the term is more suitable, we would absolutely encourage that. And the same if you had, we're working on another finance accelerator program with a relatively new mortgage provider in the UK called Perenna, and their proposition is that you can actually add the technology to your mortgage, and they actually offer you a lower rate of borrowing if you can demonstrate that you've gone from not having technology to having technology, whether you borrow off them or not. So for us, it's about finding the right solution, and I think where we're seeing traction with the energy as a service is in um, people in their kind of mid 20s to mid 30s. Typically, people who are maybe a little bit more used to a kind of service type subscription model. You know, the the ownership piece is less of a concern, and people that are moving into kind of new build estates where there is an existing service plan in place for maintaining the park and the local grounds and maybe roads that aren't necessarily adopted by the local authorities. So this kind of I buy this house and it comes with a service contract to look after those things starts to become a little bit more normalized in for people in that age category. So they seem to be seeing it more as a I don't need to worry about this. If I take out a loan and I buy the product and I have it installed and I make that choice and that installer disappears, um, or retires or I can't get hold of them anymore, that's now my problem. Whereas if under an energy as a service contract, it is the service provider's commitment to you for that 20-year term. And absolutely, if you find that that service provider is not delivering on that solution, then you're going to stop paying your monthly subscription. And you can imagine from a funder and a finances perspective, that's the last thing they want. So it's a very big commitment on both sides. And I think that's probably one of the things that came as a bit of a surprise to me when I started going through this journey. Understandably, Energy Systems Catapult were very much talking about the commitment that the homeowner is making to this. The homeowner is committing to a 20-year term. They're committing to that provider. They're committing to that technology for the duration of the term. But actually, when you talk to the lenders and they're entering into a 20-year agreement, they're committing to that as well. They're committing resource. They're committing to establishing an infrastructure to support that for a very long period of time. And it doesn't matter whether it's one home or you do 100,000 homes. You have to have a person there capable of answering that phone for the next 20 years. You can't do a handful and go, you know what, I've changed my mind. I don't want to do this anymore. So it's a very big commitment on both sides, but I think it will land with people who like that kind of hassle-free, it's somebody else's problem. I will pick up the phone if there's an issue, and their job's to come out and sort it.
Do you know, I'd not stopped to think about that component of it actually, that there have been so many schemes, for example, the plug-in car grant and all that kind of thing, where the grievance with them is that people don't know how long they're going to last or if they'll suddenly be pulled away. And I think that has created quite a lot of nervous for people generally in terms of adoption of all sorts of clean energy technologies. And actually, how much of that long-term agreement really does a lot of that work for you. Say, well, no, this just is what it is. And I suppose the other compelling thing about that is that actually the financiers, that everyone who's involved in this is saying, we know this will only become more compelling because we know that electricity is only going to become more self-generated, more renewable sources, more and more decoupled from gas or fossil fuels. That's really interesting, and I'd not thought of it in those terms. But also, I'm totally not surprised that your core demographic are people in their 20s and 30s who are very used to leasing cars rather than owning cars, are grateful that they don't have to think about MOTs, any of that kind of thing, and in doing so get access to some of the best technology in a much more affordable way. I think it would be a pretty safe assumption to say that of the 350,000 heat pumps installed in the UK currently, most of those heat pumps are probably in homes where people are fairly affluent and probably haven't had personal experiences of fuel poverty. And if this is going to be an inclusive transition, we have to make these technologies available and accessible and inclusive to as many people as possible. Do you think energy as a service type solutions are a way to tackle some of those things?
100%. And I think that is probably a core part of it, because the, when you consider that, um, when somebody's on this journey, and you're replacing something that they've paid for years, you're not asking somebody to take out a loan for something that is a frivolous purchase. You're what we're saying is, you've already been buying your energy and heating your home, and you can demonstrate that clearly, that you've been paying your energy bills, and you've been heating your home to a certain level, you've been consuming a certain amount of electricity. All we're asking them to do is to replace that payment. Instead of paying that to an energy supply, you pay that to a service provider, and in return you will see a reduction in your monthly payments. From a lender's and from the financiers perspective, that's a much more compelling story, and that means the risk profile is much less, much lower, and therefore you can really take that to the masses and take that to people that are maybe struggling in that environment at the moment. And I think fundamentally where we see the biggest impacts will be the people who are being hit by these price fluctuations. Because you may be in a position today where you're already on the brink of what you can afford from a cost of living perspective, and that is, but you're getting by, um, as
Mm.
people do. They survive. Maybe they spend a little bit less here. Maybe they heat the home in a slightly different way. Maybe they don't go out for as many meals. Maybe they buy slightly different brands of product to keep them in the position where they're surviving. But when we have, as we've seen in recent years, um, global energy crisis, where we see fuel prices spike pretty much overnight,
Mm.
what can you do in that scenario? How can you protect yourself from that? And the something like an energy as a service contract, with the fact that the majority of your energy is going to be coming from this solution, it means that you won't be as impacted by those kind of things. So actually, the risk profile for that customer drops significantly for the lender, but also the risk for that customer in terms of being hit by these fluctuations drops significantly. So
Mm.
for that enables the lenders to get comfortable in lending into people that maybe couldn't afford to walk into a bank, or would be seen maybe as more risky, because once you lend them that money, what's to say they are going to buy something that's going to reduce their energy bills? What's to say that money is going to be used and not frivolously spent elsewhere? So it's it's directly linked to a product that is going to make that customer more financially better off. Um, it's replacing an existing spend that they're making. So it really makes the lenders more comfortable, which allows them to get into those markets.
That's fascinating. And certainly, I think we so often talk about payback periods when it comes to these sorts of technologies, but actually, the thing that people get straight away is predictability and consistency in their energy bills, because you're not so tied to whatever gas is going to do, and you can make those more informed decisions. We moved into our house last year and didn't have the gas wasn't turned on for 2 weeks or so. And part of me was thinking, like, oh, well, we're in a new house, how romantic. It's just part and parcel of this experience. There was not a single bit of it that was whimsical or romantic. It was February, it was -10. All we could do was just go to bed, because you're just so cold, you do not want to do anything else. And I think it was quite a valuable experience that if you don't have any choice but to do that, that is just inhumane. And I think anything that can be done to give everybody assurance that there are solutions for everyone is critically important. But the other thing that I think, and I'm just sort of speculating here, and maybe this is complete nonsense, but if there are these long-term agreements through things like energy as a service, then presumably there's scope for bits of these technologies to be offered as benefit in kind, and that there's actually a tax incentive for people as well. Is that something that there have been conversations about, or is that total nonsense?
No, 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 absolutely. I mean, I don't want to kind of bang the drum too much on the lender confidence point, but it has to form part of the conversation when we talk about being able to fund and finance installations into people's homes. Um, because ultimately there's organisations that have money to deploy, but it can't be deployed at risk. And if you actually deploy that into rather than directly to a consumer, if you deploy that via a business and an employer and that has really good standing and low credit risk, then again, the cost of that borrowing, because the risk is lower, reduces significantly. So you can then feed that into the benefits in kind and enabling homeowners to access those technologies through their employers. Um, and ensuring that is a transferable thing as well. That's a crucial part of it. You know, I remember the days of the cycle to work schemes, and we actually had some employees that they would go and get the most expensive bike they could. You know, the really kind of fancy off-road bikes that were probably completely unsuitable for city living. Um, but then when they left, they have to take that with them. They have to settle that. So you can imagine that across maybe a £15,000, £20,000 installation, picking that up and not being able to carry it forward is a challenge. So it's something you've really got to kind of embed into these businesses and have that ability to take it over to a new company. Um, so it certainly falls part of the plan. It's a huge part of the solution. It's another challenge to address, but yeah, absolutely, it's part of the plan.
Mm. It's fascinating, and I know that we spoke about this on the phone the other day, that we've got the technologies. We know that the technologies exist, that they work, and that they'll only get better over time. But it really feels like there's so much scope for innovation in terms of how these things are financed, who's brought to the table, and how they can make sense for different people in different circumstances. I never thought I'd say that that's cool, but I think it is really cool. Um, Okay, I've got a couple of questions that I want to make sure that I get in. And I am so acutely aware that there are so many aspects of this that I haven't gone into. So, for anyone who's watching on YouTube, please do make sure to put your questions in the comments, and we'll try and come to them at a later date. But, okay, two things. Firstly, it feels like there are so many different bits to this when someone is looking at their own home. So, for example, heat pump, solar, battery, their energy provider. And if someone is really, really looking for ease, then actually there is a huge incentive to go for a single manufacturer of all of those bits and bobs and to take a bit of an Apple approach, perhaps. Equally, there's the alternative version, which I suppose we could say is a bit more like the Android version, in which people can select the different manufacturers that work best within their home, but perhaps don't have exactly the same ease of interoperability. It's maybe perhaps a little bit more faffy, but they've got that choice and they can continue to, choose the different parts of the puzzle. What's your take on that? Or is that sort of an overly reductive way to say we're at a bit of an Apple versus Android moment with home technologies?
It's such a it's such an interesting topic because we see that the current position for somebody that's kind of going on this journey. I would say it's very infrequent that you get somebody that says, right, I want to go for the whole solution in one go. So maybe if there was more people doing that, you might see a more common theme of people taking one manufacturer that does the whole mix. But what we tend to see is people kind of going on a journey with it and taking it in stages and in waves. And organically, then you kind of have these spikes in terms of new and innovative technologies coming out from different manufacturers that maybe is the one to go for at that time. So organically at the moment, what we see is people with lots of different tech in the home and maybe like a hidden kind of hindrance to that process, especially if you're going through transferring ownership to or selling your home to a new homeowner, is the amount of apps that you then have on your phone. to connect all this technology. And we see it even in maybe non-tech, non-smart homes. You know, you might have an app that controls your lighting, or you might then have something that controls your Alexa, and transferring that to a new homeowner can be a challenge. But even just within the home, you know, how many people are able to control their heating, but maybe their partner doesn't have access to control the heating, or the children don't have access to control the heating. So you end up with lots of different parts to the puzzle, and they lead to lots of different apps being used, and nothing centrally and universal bringing all that together. And that is ultimately what we're looking to achieve with Connect, via our Flex platform, is to enable people to say it doesn't matter whether you've got a Hive controller in your home, or a Nest, or a Give Energy battery, or a My Energy Zappy. You can, the single platform, you connect them all and they all come into one place, and you can see how they all perform, and you can get that optimization across all those technologies, but also you have that ability within reason at the click of a button to transfer all that to a new homeowner. And then you haven't necessarily got to go through the process of registering each technology onto your apps. And so we do see a lot of people that like to have the choice, but also 9 times out of 10, the best choice isn't necessarily to have one supplier for all the technologies, because the technology itself from different suppliers may be better.
I also know that this question will come up in the comments. So just returning to energy as a service for a moment, would it allow homeowners to switch energy provider, or would they then become in a 20-year agreement with one particular provider?
No, no, absolutely not. It's certainly directly written into the agreement, and it's also, from a regulation perspective, something that we need to abide by. The homeowner must have the ability to switch. But a lot of people ask, why would an energy supplier encourage this option? Because you're ultimately significantly reducing the amount of energy they're going to buy from an energy supplier. So why would an energy supplier be partnering with us on this journey? But when you take out something like an energy service, or even if you just have the technology installed and fund it through any other means, you are the cost of your energy that you're buying becomes a significantly lower contributor to your overall outgoings. So it also becomes a much smaller consideration. There's other things that you will consider cutting before you start worrying about whether you need to switch energy suppliers. And not that we would discourage that, because it creates competition in the market, and really I think we're going to see energy suppliers starting to move more into becoming service providers, as we're seeing with Octopus Energy right now. I think we will see competition to obtain customers increase, and that may be through increased incentives around sign-ups, increased incentives around export tariffs. Um, so we would absolutely encourage customers to switch during those energy contracts. It will be part of the support and the service they get, is monitoring who they're with and whether there's a better option out there for the way they run their home. Um, and as we say, it will inevitably create competition within the energy supply market.
And presumably, and I'm going to make the maths easy for myself here, but let's say it was £10 per month for an energy as a service contract. Obviously, that is completely wrong. I'm just making the numbers easy. And if you also had an energy provider and a service such as yourself, where it allows you access to virtual power plants, giving energy back to the grid, you could do the maths with yourself to say, well, actually, I want to make £10 back on my energy by being strategic with how I give it back, and take it from the grid or from renewable sources. And you could almost end up at zero, e.g. you're spending £10 on energy as a service contract. You're making £10 in what you're giving back to the grid or generating, etc., and that your cost is at zero. Is that technically feasible?
I suppose technically it is not necessarily maybe with an energy as a service contract, just because of the way that would be structured, and maybe cover that separately. But if you were a homeowner who is invested in this solution, and we've got a great example of a client in Blackpool at the moment, who has just gone through their first month of having this technology installed, and they actually took out a loan to pay for it. But what they found was the savings that they made on their energy bill more than covered the contribution to the loan.
My God.
And that is excluding any revenue that they're going to start getting this month from smart export guarantees. So actually, they're going to be significantly in profit beyond paying for it, which I think is a really, really crucial part. That this person isn't tied into a 20-year agreement. They own the technology. They own their home. They simply had the means to be able to get a loan to pay for it, and they're using the savings to repay that capital. Under energy as a service, and for that client, this is based purely on their energy savings. They're looking towards the next month in terms of what they can get from solar export guarantee and the income they'll receive there, and they're looking to the future as part of the Connect product. We enable our clients to gain access to demand flexibility revenue. So this enables people to be able to, when there's those opportunities on the grid, um, to flex their energy supply when the grid is either under pressure or has excess energy. Anybody that's connected to the Heatio Connect platform will also be able to earn from any revenue that's driven from demand flexibility. So that earning potential and turning kind of consumers into prosumers is absolutely fundamental to our strategy. When we look forward into energy as a service and how that model works, the aim is to leverage the position of demand flexibility revenue to actually reduce the monthly repayments. So actually take it as part of a consideration of the overall returns for the lender, so that rather than saying 100% of the expected return is going to come from the client paying that monthly fee, what we may say is this is the monthly fee the lender needs, and we expect a proportion of that to come from flexibility revenue and a proportion of that to come from the customer. And the more that becomes normalized and the more confidence that can be built in that, then it simplifies the equation for the customer. Your payment is just less than it would have been if flexibility had never been there.
God. I mean, I am honestly, I'm such a broken record because whenever we talk about this topic, I'm like, this is amazing. We're entering this era of internet of energy um, and you know, the fact that we can gamify this whole experience. But I do think it's interesting that there's no way that this would have had traction 10 years ago, not least because the technology didn't exist, not least because there weren't as many renewables on our grid. But also, we have a generation of adults who have grown up with gaming, grown up with digital services, grown up with this, you know, being comfortable with not owning assets, and who are comfortable with things like eBay and Vinted, sell your stuff to be able to feel like you're getting other stuff for free. So it feels like we're really at the cusp of this new era where this is something to be gamified, and I do think that is extremely cool. Um, we are going way over time, and I feel so sorry for the editors who are going to be like, for goodness sake, Imogen, we need to chop out 5 minutes of this from somewhere. But before we wrap up, I mean, it's very evident to me that you are enormously passionate about this subject. The fact that you have said it would be your mastermind subject speaks to that as well. But why do you love it so much? What's brought you to this particular point? Well, why do you get up in the morning and work on energy?
Yes. For me, I mean, as I say, I started out in renewables and heat pumps, and it was never a. I was working on I was working on mansions of houses. These, Wentworth golf course, huge mansions where this technology was going in. But I was from a small town in North Wales, where fuel poverty was an absolute real thing, and it was felt by a lot of people there. And I think when I would get up and I would go to work in these lavish locations, and as I kind of started to understand the technology and the design process and things like that around it a bit more, I remember speaking to a particular client and I calculated their renewable heat incentive. And before the cap came in, they were going to get around £90,000 under the renewable heat incentive over a 7-year period.
Wow.
And I don't know, the system, it was a huge installation. Maybe the system was going to cost them £30,000. So, and I remember when I met the owner of the home, and he was very engaged in the project. And I said, I've done this calculation. You're going to get £90,000 from the government over the next 7 years. He had no idea that he was going to get that. But he actually made a comment that has kind of stuck with me, and this was 20 years ago, and it stuck with me. He said, "Oh, just tell him to give it to somebody who needs it." And I thought, that £90,000 could probably take 7 or 8 people in my hometown out of fuel poverty. Yet the infrastructure of that grant would never support that mechanism where he could just essentially donate his £90,000 to somebody else. And okay, that was a grant mechanism, but ultimately there was people over here that were in fuel poverty, yet there was somebody over here who could absolutely afford to have the technology installed, absolutely afford to and benefit from the savings, and they were getting these huge rewards. And I'm sure that's a mechanism, a commercial mechanism to make these things happen, but it maybe in my youth that certainly felt very unfair.
Yeah.
And to now in this era, when I look at it and I think we spend £4 billion every year delivering balance in the grid, and we do that through firing up fossil fuel power stations and contributing towards climate change, and then we still have a huge population of people who sit in fuel poverty. And it just feels like if we could move that money from there to there, that we could make a massive difference to people's lives. We could make a huge difference to climate change and the impacts it has on the country. And that's what gets me up in the morning. I suppose if I was to summarize it, I want to try and move that money from there to help these people and help the environment. And that, it seems like a relatively simple, logical thing to do, but a very complex infrastructure to put in place together.
Oh my goodness. I'm so glad that I asked you that question. It's super inspiring. And I think it's interesting that throughout this podcast, we've actually spoken very little about climate change or CO2 or emissions or anything like that, and really focused on these mechanisms that can enable more people to benefit from these technologies. So thank you so much for sharing your insights. I should tell the audience that you'll be at our Harrogate show.
Yes.
So people can come and pose their questions to you if they do have any. But thank you so much for giving up now 1 hour and 3 minutes of your time. I am enormously grateful, and yeah, thank you so much.
No, thank you for having me, Imogen. It's been great to talk, and happy to come on again if there's an opportunity in the future.
That is all that we have time for today on this week's episode of the Fully Charged Show podcast. Thank you so much to Simon for joining us and for sharing his insights on the innovation that needs to exist in the finance mechanisms that mean that we can roll out clean energy technologies as quickly as possible to as many people as possible. Now, before you go, I have a little favour to ask. Please do make sure to like, comment and subscribe. It really does help other people find the podcast and ensures that we can keep on talking about all the important and fun stuff in this clean energy transition. So that's it. If you have been, thank you for listening.